Hello and welcome to Meet the Expert. I'm Daniel and I'm super effective. Well, sometimes, occasionally.
And I'm Craig, and I've had to sell my Windows for 50 simoleons.
We've all been there. Today, it's your chance to meet two experts from Scotland's gaming industry. You're going to hear about what they've been working on and ask the questions you'd like answered to turn your gaming skills into a job in gaming.
There are lots of different jobs in the gaming sector. You could be a level designer, a game engineer, an audio producer, or even get paid to play and test games. There are great opportunities for people who have creative skills alongside technical ability. And recent figures show that the number of people working in the Scottish video games industry grew 17% in the last few years.
Today's theme is behind the scenes. So we're going to be talking to Traci and Jon about what goes on to create and bring games to market. But before we get started, I'd like to give a shout out to some of the schools and groups that we've got signed up today, and thanks for sending in questions. So hello to Balweary High School, Bigger High School, Breadalbane Academy and the Bridges Project. I'd also like to welcome Coatbridge High School, Denny High School, Dumfries and Galloway College, Fife College, Grantech, Kira Morrison Art, Kinross High School, Mackey Academy and Madras College.
This is brilliant, Daniel. We've got people joining us from right across the country as well, sending in their questions. So hello to North Berwick High School, Park Mains High School, Prestwick Academy. Hello to all the careers advisors who are joining us today from Skills Development Scotland. Hello to you. St Macar, the Community School of Auchterarder, West Calder High School and several other schools in West Lothian as well. So remember, this Meet the Expert session is all about you getting the chance to ask those experts those questions you want answered. So you need to send us your questions. You need to go to the URL that's at the bottom of the screen, tinyurl.com/expert-ask, and send us in your questions. You can also scan in the QR code as well, Daniel, if you've got a smartphone. Teachers and adults, you can tweet us today. You can tweet us at Digital World HQ.
So we've had a bunch of questions come in already, and I'd just like to let you know that if your question's chosen, you're going to be entered into a competition to win a book. And it's this book right here, and it's called Ultimate Gamer Career Mode, and it will show you everything that you'd need to know to get started in the gaming industry. And it's also written by Craig. So with that, let's get started and welcome our first guest.
Hello, Jon, and welcome to our Meet the Expert session. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So tell us, what's your job? What is it you do in the gaming industry?
I am a programmer at Pocket Sized Hands. I program games and basically just make things work. That's kind of my job.
Excellent. So we're going to start with your gamer profile. So we asked this to all our guests. So a few questions to get us warmed up here. So what was your favourite game when you were a teenager?
My favourite game when I was a teenager was Dota 2, and I prepared for this. I actually am wearing a Dota 2 t-shirt today. I need to stand in front of the camera. There it is, right? So that was my favorite game when I was a teenager, when I was going to school. It's probably the cause of all my bad grades.
So spent a lot of hours and time playing it then?
I mean, like, it's still my favorite game, and I've played like 2,000 hours of it over like the last 9 years. So, yeah, I think we'll chalk that one up as a yes.
Okay, next question then. What game are you loving at the moment? So if you're not playing Dota 2, What might you be playing at the moment?
I think I keep trying to get back into The Witness, which is The Witness, and I actually say favorite game I'm loving at the moment, Braid. I keep going back to that game. I really, really like Braid.
Excellent. So that's like a platform style game, isn't it? That kind of messes with time.
Yeah, but it's a very. I don't want to spoil too much of the game, but it's got a unique mechanic, but it works on several different levels, so it's not just like on the gameplay level. There's other story related things. I'm not doing it justice here, but it's really good.
Excellent. And okay, what cheat code would you like to be able to use in real life?
Konami code. Konami code every time because it does different things for different games. And I just like the idea that it's like you use it and you have no idea what it's actually going to do. But it'll be something good usually.
So if you were out at the park or you were out with your friends, you might just use it and then just see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like you just enter the code and it's like, oh, there's something different here than it did when I was like out shopping. For like shopping, it just slashes all your prices. Like you go out to the park, I don't know, it makes dogs come up to you, I guess, like that.
These all sound like good cheat codes.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Sounds
save
great.
money and get dogs to come and talk to you.
This is why the dream, isn't it?
So we've got a clip from a project that you're proud of, that you're working on. So let's take a look at that now.
What do we got here? Looks like a brand new digital video game for the iPhone, Android, and iPad. It's called Pocket Mortys. Look at all these little Mortys that you get to run around and collect. Mustache Morty, cat Morty, one eyeball Morty. This just seems really cruel. I mean, come on. What are you doing? It's free. It's a free game. It's not pay to win either. It's Pocket Mortys. Get over here and pick it up. It's a free game.
John, that looks really fun. Tell us a bit more about this project, about Pocket Rick and Morty.
Pocket Mortys is a project that's kind of, I don't want to use, it's a Pokemon-inspired game based on the Rick and Morty intellectual property. I can't really speak more about it than that because that's the essence of the project.
Great.
Right there.
What have you been so how long have you, can you tell us about how long you've been working on that particular project? Or
I kind of can. Like this is an interesting side of the games industry that I don't feel like it's going to be covered more and more over the coming years. But we're doing what's called live ops. So this is a project that's been, I think it was first released in 2013, and every so often new creative teams are brought in to bring new features and new ideas to the game. And Pocket-Sized Hands, which is where I work, are like the latest people to come in and do this kind of work. I personally got involved because the person who was working on the project was asking about like people who wanted to work on Rick and Morty IP stuff, and I'm just like, I've been a huge fan of this since the very first season came out when I was still like a teenager. So yes, I would definitely love to work on this thing. It's just that's how I kind of got involved. In essence.
I was going to say, it must be like a great project to be like a few years later, you're like, I'm actually making a game featuring these characters that I really like and the sort of the world of that.
It's ridiculous. It's kind of a surreal thing to have your name in the credits is the same. It's like Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, the creators of the show, and I'm a massive fan of like their work, so it's quite strange, but also really really cool. So
brilliant. And is this game out at the moment, or is this one that's going to be at some point?
It's definitely out. There's interesting features that are planned that I'm not allowed to talk about, but that are coming out soon.
That's don't worry, we're not going to grill you too much on unreleased features. We've got other questions coming in as well that Daniel's going to put to you now, I think.
Yeah, so John, today's session's about highlighting some of the work and the people that are behind video games, and you're representing the programmers and the software engineers. And at Pocket-Sized Hands, where you work, you do a load of different stuff by what you've been saying, but you also kind of specialize in augmented reality games, which I think is something quite unusual and interesting. So is programming for AR different to normal? Do you have to consider different things? How does that kind of work?
AR is an interesting, it's both a design and technology problem. You do have to, there's certain things that you can get away with in like traditional games that you can't get away with in AR and vice versa. I know this sounds very vague, but it's like that's the best way of putting it is there's certain conventions that work really well in the game setting that you can't do in AR, but there's certain things that work really, really well in AR that don't really work in traditional games. Technology-wise, the stuff that we have been building, the stuff that we have built most of our AR stuff in has made it it's not as complicated as you would think, but it's still a layer of complexity on top of like existing making games stuff.
And so is there like the one sort of aspect of AR that's that real advantage in your eyes? Like you said there's a few differences and things that were kind of better and worse from sort of development.
Well,
have you got a favorite kind of aspect?
one of the things that I mean, like, the thing I find most interesting about AR isn't stuff that's currently here, even though there's loads of interesting stuff that we already can do with AR. It's the potential of this stuff. Like, every couple of years, we'll see something like Microsoft's HoloLens headset's a great example. Every new iteration of that gets progressively, like, the leaps that they are making in making this stuff better, more accessible, easier to use. That's the stuff that really, really excites me about it.
That's actually like that. That's actually, you've kind of answered a question we've had come in from Kokodi there, where they asked about people who are currently like looking at existing AR and VR and what kind of like technology changes were coming up, and also like whether you looked forward to some of their development challenges. It sounds like you're actually quite excited about them, so that's really interesting to hear.
It's hard to be not excited about something that has the potential to have such a tremendous impact on the stuff that you do. So,
great attitude. So we've had another question come in, and this one's from Prestwick Academy, and the people would like to know, what coding language do you use the most? And I guess I'd like to add on, do you have a favourite onto the end of that?
Yeah. So my day job as a programmer, the majority of my work is done in C#. Pocket Sized are I was going to say a different kind of like company. We're much smaller than a lot of other game studios, which means that there's kind of you're expected to be able to be kind of a generalist. So in bigger studios like Rockstar, who make the GTA, the Grand Theft Auto games, they have specialized departments that all have to coordinate and do things. So like you have a section for network programming, you have a section for animation programming, you have all these things. At Pocket Size, we're very small, so we don't really have that as such. Everyone's expected to be like a jack of all trades, which is extremely interesting. So the majority of the work we do is C# and we use the Unity game engine. We also use Unreal, but all the projects I've worked on so far have all used Unity, so day in, day out, I'm basically using C#. It's not my favorite programming language, though. My favorite programming language is actually C. Most people know of C++, which is like the superset is the word that's used to describe it. It's basically just like a bunch of C++ is like an extension of C. I personally prefer C because it's very bare bones. It's very straightforward. It's very simple. It's a very compact language in that sense. So that's why it's my favorite. That and the fact that it allows me to do really interesting performance-related things.
Managing your memory yourself.
Yeah.
Everyone loves it. So I think we're gonna come back to you soon, John, and there's been a few really interesting points here. Like, it sounds like there's definitely some real advantages to working for like a smaller company, like, because you get to experience this kind of like wide variety of tasks and languages, and you get to learn a lot of stuff. So we're going to come back to speak to John soon, so keep sending in your questions. You can use the link which is at the bottom of not that side, down that side. There's a QR code as well, and there's always that chance to win a copy of the book. So let's welcome our next guest, who is Traci. Hello, Traci.
Hi, everybody.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. So, Traci, let's talk a bit about what your job is. So how would you describe what it is that you do at Axis?
Well, I'm an executive producer, and basically what that means is I work directly with our games clients to produce and create animated content for their IPs.
Brilliant. So let's talk a wee bit about your gamer profiles. This is something that we ask all our guests. So you've had a chance to hear what John had to say, and you've probably had a bit of a chance to think about what you might answer these questions. So let's start off with, what was your favourite game when you were a teenager?
My favorite game when I was a teenager was Paper Mario and the 10,000 Year Door. A lot of fun. A bit old though, but it was a lot of fun.
Nintendo. So what game are you loving at the moment, Traci?
One of my friends just released a game called Lost Words Beyond the Page. He's an indie developer based down in England, and it's a really great game about a girl who's journaling her experience of loss, and it's really fantastic. So I'm really enjoying that right now.
Super. And if you were a video games character, what would be your special move, or what ability would you want to have to use in real life?
I would love to be able to transport. I never have enough time. I have family all over the world. I have clients all over the world. So yeah, I would love to be able to transport wherever I needed to be.
I'd love that too. Imagine just
How
not
long would
having
you
to
give the
commute.
loading times for that if you wanted to travel?
We're next gen, so it's all instantaneous. A lot more power now.
So, Traci, we've got a video of, it's a show reel from stuff that you type of work on at Axis. So let's check that out, and then we're going to ask you some questions again after that.
Great.
Ain't no stopping us, we do the impossible. Yeah. Ain't no stopping us, we do the impossible. Straight to the top, we're the top dogs and we're not. Too real, never fake it. So close, I could taste it.
It's not about who you are. It's about what you represent. Wild creation. Something they've never seen before.
And that concludes our masterclass.
Oh.
Ain't no stopping us, we do the impossible. Straight to the top, we're the top dogs and you're not. Too real, never fake it. So close, I can taste it. Running, see it's coming. Run it. We do the impossible.
So cool. I love how games are becoming, like, the animation is just like at the same level, if not better than what you'd expect from TV or film, and there was so many different like brands and characters in that I think a lot of people will recognize. Like, what's been your favorite project out of those to produce, Traci?
Oh gosh, it's hard to say because they are all so different. There's one in there for Magic the Gathering, which is more of a card game, but also, of course, a video game now as well. And with these gingerbread cookies, and it was an action adventure love story featuring gingerbread cookies, and it was just a huge amount of fun. So that's probably one of my favorite projects of all time.
And Axis, you make a lot of the animations for other games, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a lot of trailer content. So if a new game is being announced or is about to release, like, we'll do kind of a trailer, just like movies get trailers, games get trailers too. But one of the big differences is that most of the time the content in a game's trailer is completely bespoke. It's not from existing footage from the game. It's stuff that we'll create specifically for that launch moment. But then we also do a lot of in-engine cinematics as well. So that's projects like Gears 5 and like Sackboy: A Big Adventure, where we actually work side by side with the game development team to create content that is actually shipped on the disc.
Great. Craig, I can see we've had some questions come in. Do you want to pick a few to...
Yeah, let's talk about some of these things. So Traci, you're going to be representing the business side of all gaming today. Are you comfortable representing the entire industry?
I'll do my best.
So although you're in a business role, most of the people that you're working with are going to be creative clients. So what do these clients come to you into the studio and ask for? What is it you're helping them make?
Like I was just saying, it's mostly trailers and bespoke content to support their game releases. That's the vast majority of what we do. And so they'll come to us with a particular need, whether it's to introduce a new IP to the world that people aren't going to be familiar with, or maybe it's reframing an IP that people know really well, but we want to put a new twist on it. So it's really helping to identify, what their requirement truly is and what they're looking to get from the animation. And then it's working along with them and our creative teams internally need to come up with something really great and deliver them something really special at the end of the project.
And do you have to kind of like pitch them the ideas for what you think they could do and sort of like coming up with ideas for their games and characters?
Yeah, we do that very often. So in most cases, the clients will come to us and they'll say, here's my game, here's the story of the game, and here's the marketing beats, or here's the marketing intent that we want to hit. And then I'll go and I'll work with one of our directors or other kind of creative, decision makers in the studio. So it could be a writer, it could be a storyboard artist, and we basically piece together what this content could be, or how, even if they give us the initial ideas, how we would actually visualize that, how we would bring it to life. And that's a very creative process, but it's also, keep my commercial hat on as well, because all of these things have a specific scope of work that we need to stick to. The client will have a particular budget that we need to be aware of. So it's all about balancing the creative needs of the client and the project and our director with the realities of how much time we have to make something and how much money we have to make something as well.
Do you ever have to go back to people and be like, that sounds brilliant, but actually we don't have 4 years to build this?
We do, but usually we're really good at problem solving. So there's some things are better left unseen, if that makes sense. So not everything needs to be shown to be impactful. And then also we're really good at kind of creative problem solving. And one of the great things about working in CG animation versus something like live action is, we can use really quick cuts. We can use cameras that don't physically exist, so we're not tied to what an actual cameraman can do. So using tips and tricks like that, and also visual effects, we can actually tell really compelling stories while not having to kind of be really explicit about everything that's happening. So there's lots of tricks and shortcuts we can take to get the same impact with maybe not the same ingredients.
Great. I've got a question here from Zara. She sent in, and this is to do with the sort of marketing side. So how do you make a game or a trailer or an animation appeal to different people? So what would you be looking for when you create something like that to make it appeal to lots of different people?
I think it's most important to really understand the IP and to understand the game that we're working with, because every game is going to be different. It's going to have a different story. It's going to have different characters, and it's really important that we're staying true to that IP and the developers that put so much hard work into creating it. So really understanding, what is exciting and what is unique about that IP, and kind of leveraging that in our actual final content, I think is really important. And then also it is understanding, who they're trying to talk to, who is the audience for this game, because there might be some particular aspect of the game that we want to highlight, for instance, that will appeal to a certain group in particular. So yeah, it's understanding the game and understanding who we're trying to talk to, and then basically trying to maximize that as much as possible.
So the next one's a question from Hayley. She's from Dundee. And you're quite fortunate in the sense that in a studio you're getting to work with different games companies, lots of different characters, different actual game franchises as well. Our question's about who is your favourite game character that you've had the chance to work with, and what sort of things do you need to take into account if you're using someone else's characters or brands or IP, so their intellectual property, the things that they've made?
Well, one of my favorite characters to work with was one of our more recent projects, which was Sackboy: A Big Adventure. So Sackboy is just this really iconic kind of PlayStation character from the Little Big Planet series, and he can't speak. So Sackboy doesn't actually talk, so he's incredibly emotive. We had to tell everything that he was feeling through his facial expressions and through his physicality, and that was just a lot of fun, because actually, not being able to speak limits us in one way, but it opens up an incredible opportunity with performance. So that was a really fun character to work with, and also just a really well-known, iconic character as well. And then in terms of like what we have to be sensitive of, it was kind of like what I was mentioning earlier. It's like we have to really understand the IP, we have to understand what's important, and we also have to understand, the boundaries and how the characters are able to be portrayed. Like, for instance, we work a lot with Riot Games on League of Legends, and they're really unique in the sense that they present their characters in a number of different ways. So they're presented in the game, they're presented in kind of these fantastic champion reveals and season introduction cinematics, but then we've also, done music videos that feature some of their champions. And so they're, for instance, very flexible with how their characters are portrayed. And as long as we're staying true to the League of Legends universe and the individual locations that these champions are from and their powers, we have a lot of flexibility. And then there's going to be some other IPs that are a little more contained in terms of how far we can stretch those characters, if that makes sense. So it's going to really vary by IP. It's going to vary by project. But yeah, it's just really important to stay as true as possible to the IPs. And then for me, I always look at it, because even though it's not my IP, like I really like to look at myself as part of that team that's trying to, work on that game. And so put myself in their shoes and what would I do if this was my IP? And I try to make decisions based on that.
Yeah, you kind of feel as if you're helping look after those characters or those brands as well, because you don't want to make them behave in a way that suddenly all their fans are going to be like, oh, that character would never do that. They would never behave in that way. That's totally out of, and you'd be like, this doesn't feel right. I think you would, especially if it's a game that you've played for a long time and you just know what that character's like, or you know what the story is, it'd be jarring to be like, nah, they would never do that. They would never behave like that. So yeah, that's an important responsibility.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Got another question from Malika, this is about the process itself. So how long would it take to go from that sort of, how long does a game trailer take to make, essentially, from the beginning when you first find out about it until it's out there on YouTube for people to watch?
Well, it's a bit about how long is a piece of string. I've had projects that have taken as little as 10 weeks, but I would not recommend going from scratch to a high-end CG trailer in 10 weeks. Would not recommend that. But I'd say our average length is probably about 20 weeks. So that's really, 5 months or so. It's a good chunk of time. And then I've had some projects that have taken over a year to complete. And then once we actually ship a trailer, we're a bit at the mercy of the actual game marketing team and when that comes out. So some of them come out very quickly. Some of them come out tied to big industry events such as E3. And then some of them come out depending on when the game's going to come out. And so if there's any delays on the game side, that can cause things to take a bit longer as well. So it's quite often that we will actually finish and ship a project, but it doesn't get released for quite a while.
So I imagine then you have to be quite tight-lipped and not talk about the things that you might have been working on for the past year or two, or, I can imagine that's a long time to have to keep secrets as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and especially on the game's in-engine cinematic side of things, because we are working directly in the game engine with the development team. And the average game for a AAA console title takes between 3 and 5 years to develop. So it's quite often, there's a project that we're working on right now that is not going to come out probably until next year. And we've actually been working on it for 2 years already. So yeah, that's a long time to not say anything about that project.
So that's the type of thing, in 2 years' time, we'll come back and we'll be like, so tell us what that was. You've got an interesting story. I'll tell you in 3 years.
Me in 2022. Yes, I'll tell you in 2022 all about it.
Add a calendar appointment.
One more question for now. So Rebecca asks, maybe this is more of something that you enjoyed. Do you have a memorable moment from your job? So a moment that you really stand out and think, I had a great time at work today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very fortunate in my role that I get to do quite a bit of traveling, whether for trade shows and events or to visit clients. And when I was a kid, I played a lot of video games. The internet, it makes me sound so old, but the internet just wasn't quite what it was now. And so there was always a big event called E3, the Electronic Entertainment Expo, that is every June. And I remember being a kid and I have to buy a magazine, Electronic Gaming Monthly, every June to hear about the new games, to hear about, what happened at E3, what was announced. And in 2019, I went to E3 and I sat in the audience and watched a game announcement trailer that I made. And it was just really incredible. I never thought I would end up in that position. When I was a kid reading all about E3, I never thought I'd actually be a part of the show in a meaningful way. So that was a pretty incredible realization for me.
That is brilliant. That's brilliant. Excellent. Traci, we've got loads of questions coming in and loads of questions for Jon as well. So what I'm going to suggest we do is If you've got a question for Traci or Jon, you can send it to us, remember, using the URL that's at the bottom of your screen or scanning in the QR code. If we use your question, you might get a copy of the book, so that's a good reason to send something in. But Daniel, let's bring back Jon and let's have a bit of a group chat, I think.
Welcome back, Jon. So
Hello.
we've got some questions that we've had loads of questions come in, so keep them coming. So these questions, let's open these up to both of you, because I think we're going to kind of focus a bit on the skills and your kind of path into your jobs just now. So kind of to get us started, Casey in Dundee asked, like, what did you study in school? Ariana, who's also in Dundee, asked, like, did you go to university or college or none? And David from West Calder asked, what was your career path into your current job? So I guess let's kind of like mix all of them up together and ask you, how did you kind of get your skills? Did you take formal courses? Did you like study at uni, or how else did you kind of get the skills that you use in your job?
I think Traci should go first for this because she's probably got a far more interesting career path than I do currently. So.
Well, thanks, Jon. Happy to go first. So I did go to university. I actually also have a postgraduate degree as well. That's how I ended up in Scotland. I got that from the University of Edinburgh. But I never had I don't have a formal background in kind of animation or game development or anything like that. I kind of took a lot of business courses that helped, for instance, like negotiation, just to help understand what I do with my contract side of things. But also, I actually think I developed a lot of the skills that I use a lot in my job when I was working in retail, because it's all about people. It's having conversations, it's getting to know people and building great relationships. So I think a lot of that skill development actually happened, before I was even in games, and was just kind of working with people, which is really important. And then I think the career path I've had, again, is a bit unique. I used to work in retail. I used to manage retail stores. And then I kind of started working for a games technology company, and I really enjoyed that. And so I ended up working at Axis Next, which is kind of taking a more active role in working along with game clients. So yeah, I've had a bit of a meandering path to get where I am now.
How about you, Jon?
This particular set of questions is going to be quite interesting because I'm actually a relatively recent entry to the industry. I've actually been working at Pocket Sized for just over a year now, and before that I was at university. But we'll start back, because I can literally tell you the exact hires that I did, Scottish hires that I did to get into university, to get to the industry. So I did higher physics, higher maths, higher engineering science, higher computing science, and higher business management. I would argue that all of these, other than higher business management, are like stuff that I found really useful. And the reason I say that for the business management side is because I originally wanted to do a more business-oriented thing, and then I realized programming was really what I wanted to do. And I was doing business primarily because I couldn't do higher English because of the way that my school kind of thing had worked out. Through that, I left in 5th year to go to Aberdeen University, where I studied computer games technology for 4 years, which was, I met some fantastic people there, without whom I wouldn't have a career. Before all of that, actually, I forgot to mention this, but I did a bit of work experience at Tag Games, which are in Dundee, who do tons of work for hire stuff. And I got really, really lucky in the sense that my computing teacher knew I was really big into games, and so he helped organize a work experience week there. And that was when I knew I wanted to enter the industry properly, was when I went there. So I'd done the 4 years. Towards the end of my degree, I got put in contact with Pocket-Sized Hands. I went through their interviewing process. They brought me on part-time initially, and then that turned into a full-time job, which I'm very, very thankful for. So that's the exact breakdown of how I got into games over the last 5 years.
Well, that's exactly what we want to know, because I think a lot of the people watching today, I know from who's signed up, these are college students today, school students as well, and they're probably in the position just like you, where they're thinking, where might I be in 5 years' time, where might I be in 10 years' time? They know that they maybe want to work in the games industry, but maybe they don't know exactly which area, whether it's going to be the sort of business, producing, directing side of things, or whether it's in the sort of technical approach as well. And it sounds like even you, Jon, who, I can tell by the way you're talking about programming that you're really into the technical side of it, but at first you were maybe like, oh, maybe I want to be involved more in the business side of it, but then as you went on with your studies, it seems like you realised that actually that seemed to be the part you were enjoying the most?
There's a critical point that I don't know exactly when it happened, but I was just really big into video games, and at some point during my education, during my start into my career, I stopped being super into video games and started being super into video games development more, which I didn't think was possible initially, but I think that's what kind of is driven. So like at a certain point, it stopped being about playing games. It started being about I want to make really interesting and cool stuff. So yeah.
I'm sure you probably like play or appreciate games slightly differently, both of you now having kind of seen behind the scenes, you know how it works. There's probably sort of small details that you go, actually, I really appreciate the way they've done that you maybe might not have noticed before, just from sort of having that experience working on them. So it's really interesting.
I pay way more attention to the credits than I ever did when I was just playing, because now I think I have so much more appreciation for all the hard work that goes into it. But yeah, I never skip credits nowadays, and I in fact pause them and slow them down sometimes.
Daniel, there's been tons of questions coming in. Do you want to?
Yeah, tons of
few?
questions come in. So this one here I think is kind of aimed at Jon, but I think I might change it a bit afterwards and ask Traci something quite similar. So Marion at Fife College has asked, what programming languages or game engines would you advise future games programmers to learn or get started with? So I guess that one might be a kind of a question really aimed at you, Jon. Is there a particular tool?
Man. This person does not know the can of worms they have just opened. Now, I'm going to be quite contrarian compared to some of the folks that I know from industry on this one. I personally believe that most people are of the mind you should use whatever you're comfortable with using, because my path into games development was I used Scratch, which was a visual programming language. I then learned Python and used Pygame, and then when I moved to Abertay, after doing a bunch of initial research, I moved to C++. I am personally an advocate for learning C++ and not really learning game engines as such until you understand basic programming fundamentals in a language like C++, which is low level and is designed for performance and systems programming. This is not an uncommon view, but it's not a common view either. It's somewhere in the middle, because it depends on what sector of the industry you're kind of in. So
we don't mind hot takes, Jon. You're allowed to.
I know. See, this is the thing, right? Like, I'm trying to. It's very hard for me to describe the kind of advice I would like to give. I'm trying to view it as things I wish I'd known at the start of my degree. Mm-hmm. But I would argue that C++ or just learning C actually teaches you a lot about how computers actually work under the hood. And once you understand that and you start layering stuff on top of it, it becomes far easier to do your job. I would like to say as well, you don't have to do this. I don't want to discourage people from getting into games programming through the route that I took or through any other route. Any route to making games is valid. The moment you have made a game, you're a games developer. Congrats, you've done it. Like, as soon as you've made a game, that's it. Like, that's you've kind of overcome the biggest hurdle, which is actually create something initially. So if you wanted to really get into the industry just now, depending on what sector, C++ is a good way into AAA development, from my experience. Unity and Unreal don't hurt either. Particularly if the smaller studios rely on Unity and Unreal a lot more than the bigger ones do. So I don't know if
Traci comes in as well here, just like I'm thinking, what could be when you were learning it, did you use a book? Did you use YouTube videos? Did you do a course? Like, just what did you do when you were learning it?
I did a little bit of everything. So Abertay are very big on, like, in your first year, in your first semester, they kind of they tell you, right, you're going to learn C++ because it's the industry standard language, and you will learn all of this stuff here. So I learned a load of stuff that I know from uni. I'm also largely a self-taught programmer. Like, my academic stuff kind of supplemented the stuff that I was going out of my way to learn on my own.
So when you were learning it on your own, did you use like a book or
books,
reading
YouTube videos,
code online?
Literally anything that I could get my hands on that would teach me stuff that I wanted to know. Googling is an invaluable skill if you're ever learning something. So online resources and books tend to help a lot. And YouTube, I should also say, YouTube videos can be great. It just depends on the subject matter and how expert the people who are teaching you actually are.
Perfect. Thank you, Jon. Daniel, you were going to rephrase it slightly for Traci as well.
Yeah, I know you're not an animator, Traci, but are there any kind of tips you would have for a young person who's thinking that they would really like to get into the animation sides of games, like they're really into sort of the motion graphics side, but they really love gaming too, and they'd like to kind of combine those interests? What would you tell them? What would you suggest that they get going with?
I think it's actually very similar to Jon. If you're interested in being a 3D artist, whether that's like a sculptor, an animator, anything like that, it is just about creating content. It's personal projects are huge. Making sure that you have a portfolio that people can look at, even if you're still in school or in college or uni or something like that. Like, never be afraid to be creating your own content, because ultimately, you're just trying to prove what you're able to do. And the more people have to look at that show off your skills, that's all that really matters. I think. While qualifications and all of that is fantastic, it's certainly not the only thing that matters, and it's much more about being able to prove what you're capable of. So yeah, building a great portfolio with your own work or projects that you can get with other students and your friends and work on together. It's all really valuable.
And some of these digital tools are free as well that you can use, or you can maybe get an educational license as well, so that although if you were doing it as your job, you might have to pay for some of them, there's stuff available that's free. I know Blender is a popular 3D animation tool that is, I think, still free as well, and getting hands-on with some of these things as well sounds useful.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Daniel, I'm still dealing with all the questions that are coming in here, which is really good. Thank you for sending them in. We'll try and get through as many of these as possible. I think what I want to ask here is someone, I'm not going to say this person's name, but this is someone who's nervous about starting college shortly, and they're going to be doing game development. So I want you to put yourself back in that position, Jon, from a couple of years ago, and thinking about what should someone know before they start. So like, what would you say to you yourself, or to someone who's a bit nervous about going and starting in games development but they're interested in it?
Yeah, I'm going to try and put myself back in that headspace. I mean, I was 17 and I left home to come up here and do this work, and to actually go to uni. So I was really nervous. One of the things that I would like to say is that you will probably meet loads of like-minded people, which is not one of the things about the games industry as a whole, is that like when you first go into a class of people who have the same, not quite the same goals, but they want to work in the games industry, it tends to be in a lot of cases a really inclusive group of people, and it'll be possibly the first time that you are with people who very seriously share some of the same ambitions that you do, and the response that you're going to get from that is going to be amazing, in my opinion. I remember when I went into like one of my first programming classes, and I sat down next to a random person. I was in the line actually for student registration, that's what it was. And I just chatted to someone next to me who's in the same course as me. This guy is now working on some of the biggest he's like working at a AAA studio. Like, the people you will meet will be what, in my opinion, mold the experience more than a lot of the stuff that you were taught, although that will obviously help. So it's okay to feel nervous. It's just the natural response to it. But I think you're going to find very quickly that nervousness is probably going to go away, and you're going to be surrounded by people that share the same goals as you. And there's nothing that makes you feel happier than to have that kind of point of view validated for yourself for the first time. It's an amazing experience.
Thank you. And Traci, you've studied in Scotland as well, so you mentioned you did a master's in Edinburgh, University of Edinburgh. What was that master's course?
It was an MBA, a Master's in Business Administration.
And how did it feel? Did you know at that point that it was going to be games that you were maybe going to do in the future, or at that point was it still a case of, okay, I'm shaping up my business skills here?
Well, the intention was definitely to enhance my skills in business, because I had been working in management roles previous. But on my intake form, they had kind of asked what industries that you're interested in. And I had made a note that I was interested in video games, knowing Scotland's reputation in the industry. So it was just kind of a one-off. I never really thought about it again. But then about a year later, when I was ready to start my internship, I was approached by a facial animation technology company working a lot with game studios. And so basically they said, it's like, well, we're not a video game studio, but we work with a lot of video game studios, and then it turned out to be a really great fit. I got to work on games like Tomb Raider and Days Gone and Shadow of Mordor. And that was my first job in games, working on some of these kind of fantastic IPs. So yeah, it was without coming to Edinburgh and without doing that program and getting that opportunity, I probably wouldn't be in games at all, to be honest.
Oh my goodness. Did you get to meet Lara Croft?
We got to do some animation on Lara Croft, so close.
That's a gaming celeb, exactly. Like, imagine getting into gaming and meeting one of the legends of games. Daniel, you've got another question that's come in here.
Yeah, so we've only got a few minutes left, so maybe let's go for some sort of more like quick fire responses to this one. I quite like this question from Brooke, and it's just how you keep up with current trends in technology, like through the media. Like are there blogs or the YouTube channels that you particularly like, that you kind of keep up with what's going on in the world of games, because there's so much at the moment?
Like off the top of my head, Twitter. If you're a programmer in particular, the Hacker News forums, news.ycombinator.com, I think. That's where I keep with a bunch of technology trends. There are a bunch of different blogs that I could list off here. I mean, YouTube-wise, I follow a lot of different stuff. It's very hard for me to pinpoint the exact things personally. I mean, like that and a complete disregard for like my personal life in some regards, where I'll message people about stuff and I'll be like, yo, have you seen this news article? It's like 2 a.m, go to sleep. But it's this really exciting piece of tech that's coming out. It's like HoloLens 2 is coming out. That tends to help.
Yeah, I think naturally, like, you talk to your pals like that, don't you? Like, I don't need to read any of the tech journals that Daniel texts me.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
Broken. What about you, Tracy? What do you do to keep up to date with trends in technology and games?
For me, I read a lot of gamesandhistory.biz. I get their digest sent to my inbox probably 3 times a week to just keep up with kind of the headline news. I'm also, similar to John, use Twitter a lot just to kind of see and hear about what's going on. And there's also a fantastic UK games industry Slack that I'm a part of, and that helps keep me right as well.
Excellent. Daniel, have we got maybe time for one more question?
Oh, it's the pressure on choosing a good one, because there's honestly about 40 or 50 here.
Yeah, if you've enjoyed taking part today, thanks for watching this video. I'll let Daniel pick one more. You'll be able to watch this afterwards as well. If you want to thank Jon and Traci for joining us today, you can like the video. That's a way that you can show that you've enjoyed it today. You can also subscribe to the channel if you want to follow more of these types of things in the future. Daniel, have you got one?
Yeah, okay. I think this one's maybe coming from a careers advisor, and it's, what's one common myth about your field or your profession that you want to debunk? So just like one thing that maybe people have like a misconception about. So maybe we'll go to you first, Traci.
I think the biggest one for me is games are for everyone. Games are made by everyone. It's certainly not just a certain gender or a certain cultural background. It really is for everybody. And so yeah, I would just encourage, especially any young women watching, that there is a place for you in this industry, and I would love to see you in it.
How about you, John?
Same question to you. What myth would you want to debunk?
A common myth about games programming that isn't the traditional one, which is people saying, oh, so all you do is play video games. So actually, no, right, you know what, I'm going to stand up for the game design profession here, because this is a thing that people don't know about. Games design is important, and we have, there are dedicated people who design games, and a lot of people outside of the industry don't quite seem to understand that this is a thing. So like, people think that there's the art and there's the programming, and they think that's it. They don't think that there's the design people, and the design people in a lot of cases are the ones who make the decisions that have a lot of the most impact, because it's they do exist. They are a thing. I'm kind of one of the things I'm sick of seeing is people trying to explain to like elderly relatives and their friends what they actually do if they're a games designer. It's a legitimate thing. People don't seem to think that this role exists when it does, because without them, we probably
and you can
wouldn't
do
get
it in Scotland.
I mean, I know a few people at my company who do games design, and they're the ones that are making the decisions that are like, why have you placed this button here? Like, this button should be over there. People are not going to click over there. That kind of thing.
Well, it's
very
funny.
excellent.
You know, it's funny you should say that, John, because actually 2 weeks ago we had another Meet the Expert session looking at the games industry, and that time it was about the things that you see and you hear. And one of our guests was a user interface, a user experience designer, and she designed a lot of the buttons and the elements and thought about kind of the interface of games. So absolutely, if you're interested in that kind of like side of the discussion, then check that out. The link's going to be in the description underneath here, but the video's also on the YouTube channel if you want to check that out also.
So thank you everyone for joining us today. It has been a great stream. It's been great to speak to Jon and Traci. Jon and Traci, thank you very much for taking the time to share your insight and to answer these questions that have been coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been great.
We will be in touch with your teachers or your group leaders to find out if you've won one of these books. We'll be in touch with you soon. But other than that, Daniel, what else do people need to do? What's wrapping things up now, I guess?
Well, we're on YouTube, so why not like and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to kind of see future similar Meet the Expert type videos. That'll let us know that you're enjoying it. But for now, I guess it's bye from Craig.
Bye-bye.
And it's bye from me too. See you next time.